been excited to tell a story. I've told the story before. This time I've got photos. Maria, all summer long, was trying to get her son Dylan to go off the diving board. And they'd go to the pool on a regular basis, and she wanted to get Dylan to jump off the diving board, and he wanted no parts of it. He did not want to do that. He did not want to go off the diving board, and she tried to get every single family member to get him to do it. Nope. And it was towards the end of the summer, and it was a family event, and great grandpa heard the whole play to try to get Dylan to go off the diving board, and great grandpa, he understood the situation. He understood the situation that, well, Dylan is afraid. It's scary to jump off the diving board. And so he realized he needed to step up. And so 95-year-old great-grandpa goes and borrows a pair of swim trunks, with cane in hand, walks to the diving board. Well, we don't know who was more afraid in that moment than anyone else. Everybody was concerned as to how this was going to go. But this was not his first rodeo. I have his name written down here. Daniel Biss had served in World War II. He had served in Korea. He had faced down bigger challenges before than this diving board. And sure enough, he wanders off to the front of that thing, and he goes off and does it, and it essentially functions like a dive. However he got into the waters is how it produced. And it was the last time he did this, right? But right after that was the first time that Dylan took his leap off that diving board. Courage is contagious. It's contagious. And who knows what opened up to Dylan after this. What I'd love to be able to say is, like, Dylan went off and became a gold medal diver in the Olympics or something like that. We don't know. But the way courage works is it opens up to us entirely new opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be there before. Because after that, Dylan was the kind of kid that went off the diving board. He wasn't that before. As a kid, we lived near the woods in South Jersey, near the Pine Barrens. One of my favorite things to do in the summer was to go off on a trail and get lost. I'd just go get lost. It wasn't like, I wasn't in the Amazon or anything, but I'd be able to find something. But there's something thrilling about the fact that I could be on a path and in two turns be opened up to something entirely new. Maybe I'd find a new park. Maybe I'd end up in someone's backyard. Maybe there was the one time when we found the blueberry farm, and it was all these wild blueberries growing in rows, right? And, who knows what you might find. But for all of us, an entirely new opportunity or new moment is maybe just two turns away from us. And we don't even see it. We don't even know about it. Maybe you've experienced this in the city. You're just kind of wandering around this New York City, and all of a sudden, two turns and there's Central Park. Or two turns there's Greenwich Village. Or two turns and there's a ghetto. Whatever it might be, every single one of us may only be two turns away from something entirely new for our lives. Faith teaches us that there is a promised land and that we can go from here to there, wherever that there might be. But it's courage that calls us forward to take those next steps. Courage enables us to take the next step from here to there. And I think this is, every speaker likes to say this is more important than ever. But I think it's a fresh contemporary issue. I think there's a lot of people who are stuck with fear. Maybe it might be you, or somebody you really care about, and you could just tell they are stuck. They've been in the same place. They've been walking up and down that same path. And it's the same path. It's the same spots of mud. It's the same trees, the same branches, same brambles. And they're disappointed and frustrated that it's the same path. And there may be an alternative path that they can take, but they haven't been able to take it because, well, they are afraid. We live in a world that profits off of fear. We have devices that are sitting in our pockets or on our laps right now that have algorithms to generate FOMO, fear of missing out, xenophobia, fear of people that look different than you or think differently than you, conspiracy theories, inadequacies. The most consistent command throughout all the scriptures is do not fear. Jesus talked a lot about money, and Paul and the apostles, they talked about sex regularly, and power is always an issue. But more than anything else, the Bible commands us. It's very, very clear. Like angels show up and say, do not fear. Almost every turn of history, do not fear. Fear is the thing that keeps us back. It holds us back. And with all the changes we've experienced, people are experiencing fear in much more heightened ways. 125 years ago, I'm confident that if you went to a church on the first Sunday, you would find a church that's going to teach on fear and teach on courage. Now, what was different? Why? Because it's always going to be an issue. It's always going to be something that we're going to have to address in our lives. What was different 125 years ago is that most people lived with about 100 people around them. They lived in a village of maybe about 100 people, maybe a town. They knew about 100 people. And when they got the news, they got what the best and worst that happened among the 100 people around them. All news was, generally speaking, local. And there was a lot of things to be afraid of back then. Today, we may walk past 100 people. We may be engaged in text messages with 100 different people on any given day. The amount of people we interact with on so many levels is so much higher. Think about the news. Let's just say there's 8 billion people in the world. We get to hear the 5 worst things that happened among 8 billion people every single day. And you wonder why everybody's afraid and why everybody is paralyzed. Because bad news is always more interesting than good news, right? And so generally speaking, every single day, that machine in your pocket is telling you the worst things that happen. Or is comparing, that girl in 1900, she was comparing herself to the 12 other teenage girls she knew. Now she compares herself to the 4 billion other women that she gets to compare herself to. And when it came to your calling, you had a sense as to a clear path. Now, every single one of us has an infinite amount of options. There's so many things we might be missing out on. Social media tells us how everybody's life is going really, really well. We live in a world that's consistently and effectively driving our fear and keeping us stuck. Because how are you going to get your hands around any of this? Fear is in some ways, when it comes to spiritual formation and being human, it's the number one thing the Bible wants to protect us from. The prophet Yoda, you remember what he says, right? Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. By the way, Yoda is not a prophet from the Christian scriptures, just so you know. But we fundamentally know that. And the temptation is to only offer comfort in the face of our anxieties. But for us to step into the life that God has given us, He is going to offer comfort for the purpose of building up our courage, to encourage us to step into the life He has called us to. And so today we're starting a series called Courage, and we're going to study it from the life of Moses. Moses was thrown into a whole bunch of things in his life that he didn't really want. And yet he continued to have to find courage in all sorts of different ways. And in so many ways, when he popped up like 3,500 years ago, scholars say he lived in either the 15th century or the 13th century. It's hard to know. It is like the Bible's old. Like, this is ancient for the Bible. This is like old. This is old among the old. But this goes far back. But if you see the transformative moment of Moses' life, you'll see that so many things changed because of his courage. Things like our entire legal system of appellate courts that move on up to a higher courts, a sense of laws and rules and a sense of separation of justice from political leadership. The entire priestly pastoral system of caring for people. The whole nature of social justice. Moses, in contrast to just every other ancient Near Eastern custom, continued to advocate for the widows, the orphans, and the immigrants. You read all the way through the first 5 books of the scriptures that are attributed to Moses and his project of getting them written. They continue to come back to, if you're not caring for the widow, the orphan, and the immigrant, you need to question your faith. They say, you'll hear, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbors yourself, and love the foreigner, the immigrant that lives among you. Those 3 things come together. Social justice is rooted in the vision of Moses for life. Multiple branches of governments, prophets, priests, and kings come from Moses' vision. The dignity of all humanity. You go outside of the Judeo-Christian world view, even in places that consider themselves Judeo-Christian, it's either honor, shame, or caste and karma. The Judeo-Christian worldview is the only one that creates and maintains both dignity and grace. The civil rights movement rooted itself into Moses' vision for freedom. And again, all civil rights is driven and maintained by a Christian worldview. Now, that was a transformative moment 3,500 years ago. But what if your life, my life, our collective life is just 2 turns away from being unstuck and seeing things happen that we didn't expect to happen, that could be activated by small yet purposeful acts of courage? Today I want to read the context of the world and the life that Moses stepped into and show that that situation wasn't very different than ours, and that which we do can change things in ways we wouldn't expect, that we can provoke providence for our own life and for our world. So, most of what we're going to be doing is going to be out of the book of Exodus. It's the 2nd chapter of the Bible. I'm going to read chapter 2, but I want to give you a little bit of a background on the first book and chapter 1 just to set us up. So, Genesis, God creates the world. God calls Abraham to be a family. He's going to make Abraham into a great family. Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. They're a total disaster, dysfunctional family. Big famine hits Israel. Through a series of miraculous events, God brings Jacob's family, all 12 sons, which becomes the 12 tribes of Israel. They all land themselves in Goshen. Not West Goshen Township, but they probably had a West Goshen Township in Egypt. But they all land in Goshen, right in the center of Egypt. This is like the best of the land, and God brings them there to protect them from a famine. And God just starts blessing Israel, just blessing them. Everything goes well for Israel, and because things are going well for Israel, things go really well for Egypt. And they can continue to grow. They go from a family to the nation. They just start having children and children, so many children. Things go really, really well. And then next thing you know, Pharaoh starts realizing that there's like a lot of Hebrews. And what are they going to do? And Pharaoh gets freaked out about that. He gets freaked out about that, and he says, all right, we need to start thinning out the Hebrews because they're going to take over us, right? Xenophobia, right? There are foreigners among them. We got to start thinning out the foreigners among us. And so that's what Pharaoh starts doing. He starts thinning them out. And so all sorts of things like, telling the midwives, hey, well, let's not have these babies live. Let's go ahead and kill all the males. And eventually the midwives, they don't want to do that. And so Pharaoh simply makes a command, every single Hebrew male is going to get thrown into the Nile. Which wasn't an uncommon thing in the ancient world. Genocide was sort of assumed. And so this is a tremendously difficult situation. And what you're going to see in the story we're going to read is the courage of 3 women and how they provoke providence to see a change. Starting in Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman. That's one of the tribes of Israel. And she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And this is during the time where all the males are getting thrown into the Nile. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister, the baby's sister, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe. Pharaoh is the ruler of Egypt, right? So Hebrew baby hanging out. Pharaoh ends up in the river outside of Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walk along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister came up and asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. This is the story of Moses' birth. This is the story of his family background, which he will learn. He was a Hebrew who was raised in Pharaoh's household. Imagine the irony of this, that Pharaoh was so threatened by the Hebrews that he's going to have all of them thrown into the Nile to protect his empire. And sure enough, one gets thrown into the empire that ends up in his own household that undoes his entire empire. I want us to see 3 things when it comes to the context of courage in here. First is this. We need to know that we walk as winners. The whole problem in this situation comes down to the fact that God is blessing the Hebrews, and he continues to bless them. And because he's blessing them, they are blessing Egypt. Everything is getting good in Egypt because the Hebrews being there, because God's people are there. And everything is going well. And, well, Pharaoh's threatened by that. But it's easy to see this situation, first of all, that there was a problem, that Pharaoh is mistreating the Israelites. But we need to step back and say is what was really going on is that things were really going well. Things were really going well. And I think that's one of the things that we easily forget as humans. the truth of the matter is 99.99999% of things went really well for all of us today. As far as I know, all of us woke up and we were breathing and our bodies were working and our digestive systems continue to do what they do and our hearts work and our brains work. There was coffee for most of us, right? We had food. Our cars worked. You know, most of us had gas in the car when we got in. Some of us didn't have, but like 99.999% of things go amazingly well for us all the time. The earth continued to spin. The sun continued to produce its temperature. We had the right amount of oxygen for us. So many things continue to go right for humanity all the time. And we forget that. Christians often forget that not only are things going well for us, generally speaking, all the time for us as humans, but we forget that the Jesus we celebrate at Christmas is Emmanuel, is God with us. And I should say this, that he is God for us. It's tempting to look at the Bible and says the Old Testament is all about laws and the New Testament is all about grace. But the entire Old Testament is about grace. It's all about grace. It's all about God continuing to love and choose his people. God calls Abraham, not because he did anything right. God created a great nation of Israel, not because they did anything right. God called Moses, not because he did anything great. It's all God choosing to be good and to bless. Some of you may have seen the Capital One commercials, the easiest decisions in the history of decisions. One of my favorite ones is the pickup basketball game in the playground. And it's a bunch of fifth graders. It's like fifth graders, and it's clear puberty had not happened to these children, right? They are below 5 feet. They're below 5 feet, and they're doing the draft. And if you grew up like I did, like life is a forever series of drafts, and you're just hoping to not be picked last, right? Well, here you are. You got two kids, and they're trying to pick who they want on their 3-on-3 basketball team. And as this one girl, and she's picking first, as she's surveying the field. She notices, well, Charles Barkley is one of her options as to who she chooses, right? And so she says, I'll pick Barkley. And Charles Barkley, used to play for the Sixers and played for the Phoenix Suns, is well known, he's 6'5", 300 pounds. He'll probably do okay against fifth graders on the basketball court, right? But he gets picked first, and he says, "Yes, I still have it," right? And he starts trash talking with the other kids that are there, and he's so glad to be on the team. And make no mistake, that team is going to win every other game they play when it comes to 3-on-3 pickup basketball. Why? They have Charles Barkley on their team. She will never have to worry about winning that game ever again. If you're a believer, this is your situation. You have God on your team. You walk as a winner. Full stop. Full stop. Now, Christians do all sorts of weird things. They you could bench Barkley, or you could decide to shoot every shot yourself, or be threatened because Barkley's on your team. There's all sorts of things that you can find a way to lose when you're guaranteed to win. And we do that all the time. But make no mistake, Charles Barkley's on your team. Be confident. Yes, pass him the ball. Yes, let him call the plays. He knows more about basketball than you do. And yes, work him into the lineup. Don't bench him. Don't be threatened by him. Let him win for you. But if you are a Christian, you can be confident. Why? Because you've got a great team. And you can walk as a winner. You don't have to be threatened. The theological term for this is the providence of God. God's sovereign, loving care for his people. God has providential care for you, a plan for you that will go well. Will go according to your terms? Will he run your play? Will he do it exactly the way you want? No, he won't. But if he's on your team, let him call the play and things will go well. And then maybe you don't have to take every single shot yourself. But maybe you do have to take some shots yourself when he gives you the ball. The real issue going on the front end of this that nobody sees is that God was generous in his blessing. And I think when it comes to the context of our courage, you should know that God is for you, that God is on your team to help you win. But not everybody wants Charles Barkley on their team. And so the story is going to play out in the book of Exodus that there's a Pharaoh that's really, really threatened by God. And the truth of the matter is everybody's threatened by God. We live in a world where every heart has a Pharaoh inside of it that's threatened. And you're like, I don't have a Pharaoh inside my heart. Well, think about what's going to happen for Pharaoh. God's going to come to Pharaoh and says, I want to take away something from you that's really important to you. And Pharaoh's going to say no. Have you ever had God take something away that's important to you? How did you respond? Was it a little bit like Pharaoh? It's important to know that the real issue going on with most of the problems around us is people's problem with God. It's their problem with God. That person who, gave you hand signals while driving, they might be frustrated about this, that, and the other thing, and you're just the person that they're upset with, but they're upset with that their life isn't going the way they want it to go. Your boss who's driving you crazy, they may be incompetent, but their lack of character and their frustration, their angst, their fears, their whatever is causing you to have difficulties and problems is really a God problem. When you talk to a seasoned alcoholic, they will tell you that they don't have an alcohol problem. They have a God problem. Why? Because they want to control their pain. And in life, you can't control your pain. You can throw some pills at it. You can escape it for a little while. But at the end of the day, the real enemy for most people is God himself. The alcoholic doesn't have an alcohol problem. They have a God problem. The workaholic doesn't have a self-control problem. They have a control problem. They want to control things themselves. They can't pass Charles Barkley the ball. They can't accept God's control over all things. They can't accept God's control over the outcomes. They need to hold the ball always. Why? Because if they give it up, who knows what might happen. They don't have a work problem. They have a God problem. I know this well myself. My problems deep down are rooted in the Pharaoh inside my heart that says, I want to control. I want the credit. I want to make all the baskets. If I give you the ball, you might not give it back. If I let you captain the team, you might lead the team in a way I don't want it to go. So just give me the ball, and Charles, you sit on the bench for a little while so I can run this thing, so I can run this life. The pattern of Scripture when it comes to sin is that we either attack God or evade him. Adam and Eve attacked by grabbing the apple, and then they hid from God. Cain kills Abel and then hides from God and makes excuses. Am I my brother's keeper? We're either attacking God's control or escaping him. In the story of Moses, you're not going to see him win any battles. He's not going to win any battles. God doesn't need us to fight for him. He doesn't need us to win battles for him. God can take care of himself. If Charles Barkley is on your team, you don't have to beat the other team so much as you need to trust the game plan and give him the ball appropriately. Which leads us to our story, where these three women provoke providence. You can only imagine what it was like for mothers in those days. But this particular mother had a plan. Ironically, what's in a very interesting sort of way, she's going to create this thing that looked an awful lot like an ark. In the early parts of Genesis, an ark was there to save humanity. She makes this basket very much like an ark, made of some of the same materials that the ark was made. And just consider what it was like for that mother to place that 3-month-old baby. Close up the lid, put it in the water, wash it down, and trust. You can imagine what it was like for his sister. Now there was some wisdom and craftiness there, because they didn't just stick it anywhere and stick it out in the river to let it flop around. If you watch The Prince of Egypt, they made it seem like, they sent Moses down like a whitewater rafting trip. That's not exactly what happened. They took the basket and they just kind of dropped it in near Pharaoh's palace. And the sister just waited and watched. You can only imagine what it was like for that mother and that sister to think about their beloved little boy in that basket. And then Pharaoh's daughter sees this little Hebrew baby. And Pharaoh's daughter, she was looking at this baby, and she knew the story. She knew the story. She knew what was happening to the babies. She knew what her father expected to happen to Hebrew babies. But she sees this one, and her heart goes out to it. And she decides she's going to take care of this one, defying the order of Pharaoh himself. And by this way, by the courage, and you know that in some ways we know the Hebrew scriptures stand out remarkably in the ancient Near Eastern world, partly because you would never make women the heroes of a story like this. But these stories they tell the truth about what happened. And sure enough, this baby shows up into Pharaoh's life, and Moses is going to be raised to be a leader, raised to have to learn how to lead, learn how to read, learn how to write, learn how to be a king, and learn how to undo an empire. But it took a lot of courage. It took a lot of vulnerability. It took a lot of surrender on behalf of these women. But what they did is they provoked providence to act on their behalf, on behalf of the world. I want to read a favorite quote of mine by Johann Wolfgang van Goethe. I'm going to need to pull it up. I'm going to need to pull it up on the slide here. It goes this way. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness concerning all acts of initiative and creation. There's one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. And this is the truth, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. You can probably tell a story of providence in your life that you stepped out and did this thing, and all of a sudden these 5 to 7 things happened that showed up to enable that dream to actually happen. I've seen this happen when folks finally say, I'm going to go to recovery. And all of a sudden, somebody shows up that they know and they've seen that person before. They decide, hey, they find an accountability person. They find a sponsor. All of a sudden, the family sees and understands what's going on. And the family doesn't judge. The family has compassion. All of a sudden, they feel support and not condemnation. All of a sudden, things start changing. The person says, you know what, I'm going to start dealing with this issue. I'm going to go to a counselor. And all of a sudden, things start changing. Things show up for that person. I remember I had this plan that I was going to write a book and build a men's ministry off that book. I was going to take a couple of years to do it. My boss said, no, let's just do that this summer. And I said, really? Can we do that? She said, yeah. And we did it. And all sorts of things showed up to enable that to happen. For some of you, it was when you decided to start your education. For some of you, it was when you decided to finish that education. I did my work on my doctoral studies, and based on my work challenges, I need to step back from them. But at some point in time, I said, I'm going to finish that. And a lot of that work laid the groundwork for what we have as a church. All sorts of things start showing up. When we step out, providence starts moving along with us. As a basketball coach, one of the worst things that could happen to an offense is when 5 players are standing around looking at each other, watching somebody dribble. What you'll hear a coach just simply say, move. And once one person moves, the defense has to follow that person. And then that creates a gap that another person fills in. And all of a sudden, the basketball court starts moving. And all sorts of things start being possible that were never possible before when they were standing in one place. If you are a bad basketball player, just get on offense and keep running around. Eventually, you'll be open for a shot. You'll make it. But when you move, the key difference is moving. When that offense is static, nothing can happen. When you step out in faith and courage, you provoke providence to move with you. And all sorts of things become possible that weren't before. My hope for us in this series is that we see that happen in our lives. Along the way, the Spirit of God might nudge you to a step of courage, maybe in a conversation with somebody, maybe a decision you need to make, maybe something you need to admit, maybe something you're going to stop trying to control, or maybe whatever that might be, that change you might need to take. And you might be 2 turns away from a whole new thing in your life, a whole new opportunity, a whole new legacy that wouldn't have been there before if you hadn't moved. What might that look like for you? What might that look like for those you love? What might that look like for our church? What might that look like for our community? Let's pray.